Welcome to Between the Reads, where we shine a spotlight on some of the most talented Black authors in the industry to discuss their works of fiction and the inspirations behind them. Each episode will dive into the rich and diverse world of literature, exploring everything from historical fiction to romance and speculative fiction to YA and beyond. Tune in as we celebrate the voices of Black authors and the power of storytelling. Are you ready, Boos and Bros? Then sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Johnny Compton is a San Antonio-based author whose short stories have appeared in several publications since 2006, including Pseudopod, Strange Horizons, and the No Sleep podcast. His fascination with frightening fiction started when his kindergarten teacher played a record of the classic ghost story, The Golden Arm, for her class. The Spite House is his debut novel through Tor Nightfire. Johnny, welcome to Between the Reads.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you're here. You scared the crap out of me with this book.
I'm glad I did. I literally write that in the when I've had the pleasure of signing a few copies now, and that's one of my things, one of my go-tos. Is I hope it scares you.
Yeah, that it did, sir. That it did. So tell us what this novel, The Spite House, is all about.
Oh, The Spite House is about a father on the run with his two daughters. We don't know why they're on the run, but we're going to find that out as the story goes. As much as it's a horror story, there's also a lot of a mysterious element to it. He's on the run with his daughters. They're kind of fugitives. And so in desperation to kind of get some more stable income as opposed to the odd jobs he's been taking, he agrees to stay in a very haunted house, the titular Spite House, which, if anybody is not aware, Spite House is an actual thing. It is a house that is literally just built to make somebody upset, just to spite them for various reasons. Mm-hmm. And so the house in question exists in, well, not in real life, but in my story, exists in the Texas Hill Country. It's owned by a very wealthy woman who has her own mysterious background and reasons for why she wants somebody to stay in the house and prove that it's haunted, and she's willing to pay a very large sum of money to find that proof.
Listen. One of the challenges of this show is creating questions that do not give away anything. And when I read the book, I'm writing out questions, and then I go back through my questions after I finish reading the book, and I'm like, nope, can't ask these questions because I want people to be as shocked as I am when they read this book. So, that being said, you may notice that I'm not asking questions about certain people or things, and that is why.
Understood.
So, what is the inspiration behind this novel? Where did this come from?
Oh, great question. So, I already had some of the ideas for certain characters in mind, and I wanted to write a haunted house novel as it was. And then I read an article about spite houses. And I was just fascinated by the idea of somebody being this petty and this angry, having this much negative energy. I'm gonna literally build a house
just to make you mad,
just to make you mad, just to show how upset I am with you. And I was just kind of blown away by that idea. And then obviously the fact I went and looked to see has anybody written a haunted house story set in a spite house before, and to my knowledge, nobody has before. Mm-hmm. And so there was also that element of it too. It's like, oh, I kind of get to be the first or among the first to ever do something like this, which is pretty, remarkable in this day and age. It feels like everything under the sun's been done.
Right.
And, I mean, there's, odds are there's some kind of hidden gem that I'm unaware of that was about spite houses that beat me to it, because it's almost impossible to write something, which this is a haunted house story fundamentally, so it's still not brand new, but with at least an angle to it that has been unexplored previously. So that obviously was a big driver and inspiration for me as well, was just the idea of, maybe I can get something out there that nobody's really written about before in this way, even though it seems perfectly suited to this genre. You can't get much more of the idea of haunted houses being driven by some kind of negative energy or something. You can't get much more of a negative energy than I literally just built this house just to make somebody upset.
Right, and that just amazes me that there's actually people just, I've never heard of that before reading your book. So to know that people just would build houses just to show how pissed off they are, that's a whole lot of energy.
Yeah,
and money.
House.
To
money,
put into, yeah.
energy, time, like all this effort that you got to put into this, and then on top of building it, a lot of the time, then going in and living there. Even though in a lot of
Yeah.
situations it's pretty inconvenient, a lot of these houses are built with really bizarre dimensions to fit in
Mm,
narrow spaces or in limited confines in order to build them. So I'm
mm-hmm.
not only going to build this just to make you mad, I'm also going to live here, even though it's painfully inconvenient for me sometimes, just to continue expressing my rage against you. It's fascinating.
I feel like I'm gonna go down a whole rabbit hole if I look on Google and look up spite houses. It's just
Oh,
gonna be a
it's
whole rabbit hole.
I'm sure you would. I definitely did. This again. That's kind of how the book came about to a certain degree.
Wow. So, I mean, how did you even come across spite houses? Were you reading an article one day? Did you hear
I
about it?
I don't even remember the original article.
Wow.
I've read an article about one. I think it was about like just like one or two, and I was just like, oh my gosh! And the main one that caught my eye initially was a place in Boston called the Skinny House.
Hmm.
And so I looked at that, and that's matches kind of the Spite House I wrote about with its narrow dimensions.
Hmm.
And I looked that up, and then I went to the Wikipedia page, and then from there I started reading more individualized articles and more specific articles about it, and I went down the rabbit hole.
Hmm.
And I cannot for the life of me remember what that original article was, or where I first encountered it. But once I did, and then I really started reading it, I have my little I use multiple tools. I use my spreadsheet for story ideas. I have Microsoft Notes,
Hmm.
OneNote, which I use for like kind of elaborating on some of those ideas. And I definitely started adding to the list there. Like, okay, I need to explore this Spite House angle and see if I can graft it onto my pre-existing ideas about a haunted house story and see if it works. And I feel like it did.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It did. It did. So, in what ways is it pronounced Mason, the Mason House, or Masson House?
I've always said Masson, but I've heard people say Mason.
Okay.
It's That's not something I really was like in my head. It probably even as I wrote it, it was probably a couple of different ways. So whichever.
I feel like it's Masson because Mason is with one S, which
One
is
S, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
So,
yeah. But I've
so
heard people
okay.
say Mason, and I don't correct them, so it's all good.
Masson, I'm gonna be correct. So, in what ways does the Masson House serve? It kind of serves as a character in its own right. Now, we're not gonna tell the story of the Spite House because again, I want people to find that out on their own. But I'd like to know how you came up with its ties to the Civil War.
Oh wow, it actually that was a pre-exist one of those pre-existing elements, and I felt like this could work very well
Uh-huh.
with the idea of the Spite House.
Hmm.
And so just coming up with those ties, that those are based on here in Texas some actual events that
Wow.
really took place in the Civil War, and there are namely the town of Degner, which I did have to look up how to pronounce that, but I've heard people. That's
Okay,
another one. I've
because
heard
I
people
was
say.
saying Degener the whole time.
I've heard a ton of people say Dejner, and
Okay.
I just looked it up, and I don't even know if that's what I looked up. I don't know if that's the authoritative way to pronounce it, but I found it's a German name, and I found an actual person with that last name, and they introduced themselves as Degner, so I figured
Okay.
I'm going to defer to them. But
Okay.
the town Degner is that name. I took that from a man whose sons were killed in a massacre that is similar to some events that take place in the book, and commissioned a monument, which there's a monument in the book. Commissioned a
Mm-hmm.
monument that exists in the Texas Hill Country related to that massacre, the Nueces massacre. And so those elements were things that were already in play in my mind. And
Mm-hmm.
so then, again, I kind of already had those. Then I read the article about spite houses, and I thought, well, I mean, the idea of like this is pretty easy to connect the idea of like
Mm-hmm.
a spiteful structure with these
Yep.
kind of horrific events.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a road that can connect these two different ideas. So that's how I was able to put those together.
That was going to be my next question. Was this based on any real life events? So there are things that happen, which should be surprising, but
Yeah,
not really.
not really. No, I mean there's so much. There's a lot that I kind of had to not had to leave off the page, but at a certain point, it's like, well, which story am I telling?
Mm-hmm.
But there were
Mm-hmm.
definitely some deeper explorations of that entire concept that I could have gone into, and many more things happening
Mm-hmm.
in Texas and in the South, etc., that are lesser known in history, in
Mm.
the history books.
Yeah. So, what was your process for creating the eerie and unsettling atmosphere of the Masson House, and how did you balance that, building tension and suspense with like moments of genuine horror and dread? Because, sir, that hallway,
Oh,
the thing didn't even wait for like the first night. They're walking through on a tour, and there's something at the end, and I'm like, nope, nope, sir, I don't care how much money I need, I'm not doing it, because this hallway is no. Mm-mm.
you know what's so wild about the hallway? I just remembered this, like what something that probably influenced, like you said, something at the end of the hallway, which is one of those things that scares you. You know, as a kid, you got to get up, maybe use the bathroom, and they're but the hallway's dark. All these different things.
I'll hold it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going down the hallway.
I'm not going down the hallway. Like all these, I remember a friend of mine. I mean, of all things to scare him, but I could totally get it. I remember a friend of mine when I was younger saying at the end of the hallway, I think in his grandparents' house, there was this painting of Jesus on the cross, which I'm sure is supposed to be like, very, religiously comforting for the adults in the household. But he was like, it's horrified me. Like it's when you break it down, it's a painting of a man being tortured to death in his emaciated state. Like, and that's what's waiting for you at the end of the hallway. This act of violence. And so it was like, he was like, yo, that would freak me out. I always hated to like walk even near it. It just spooked. I was like, yeah, you're looking at a torture scene, basically. You don't think of it that way in a religious context, but that's essentially what it is, which is wild. It is, yeah. And so like I had all these ideas in my head of like just kind of wanting to write stories from that perspective. And then I just really recently remembered a church group trip that I took years ago. And there was these old we weren't staying in the old cabins, we were staying in the nicer new cabins, but there were the old deserted cabins. And I remember the church group leader for the youth group daring me to walk down, like it was just like a straight path. There's old bunk beds unused on the side, walk straight down the cabin, open door on one end, open door on the other end. And so I did, like, because I'm an idiot and I was trying to impress a young lady on that trip, which led to some other disasters. I mean, I was like 15. You're gonna do stupid stuff.
Okay.
And so well, I walked through.
You're black, Johnny. You're supposed to know better than to be walking through somebody's. What are you doing?
I know. No business at all. None. And so I was walking through, and I don't even remember exactly how this happened, but I just remember he was behind me. I don't even think he was trying to scare me. But for whatever reason, I lost track. We were talking and stuff, and he's like, how's it going, blah, blah, blah. I lost track of him. And then at some point I looked back, still talking to him, thinking he'd be back there. He wasn't. Then I turned around and he was already at the other end. And I don't even remember him like walk. I don't remember hearing him walk. Like as we were talking, I didn't hear his voice traveling. I have no idea how I got disoriented like that. But and I can't even really see him. I'm seeing him as a shadow, basically. It's so dark, and so I'm seeing this shadowy figure at the end of this walking path at the other end, outside of the cabin. And I was like, for a moment, just terrified. I was like, what in the world just happened? And then it took me a second to piece together, oh, that's just him. And so I was 15 years old. Like I remembered it now, that happening, because I was remembering other events. I was talking to somebody about other events related to that trip. And I was sitting there thinking, that had to have informed what I wrote about the hallway and the way that I portrayed certain scenes of a figure, a shadowy figure at the end of the hallway. You can't quite tell, and getting startled to see that. So I just kind of basically, to the point of your question, how did I balance all these things? I pulled just everything I could from a lot of my youth and childhood, all the stuff that I enjoyed that scared me, and really wanted to dive in, with a story that, like you said, doesn't necessarily wait to get going. You're taking the tour of the house, and there's already something
starting
there. Yeah. I wanted to get to the action pretty quickly. I didn't want to spend too much time with a lot of wondering, is that creak really, was that a footstep or not, or anything. I wanted it to kind of, I love those kind of elements, but for my story, I thought it'd be more fun to just kind of dive right into it. And then knowing that even though we have this and that contributes to the dread, worse is still on the way, and just kind of the idea of knowing things are going to get worse.
Yes.
I love I'm going to sound like a psycho. I love instilling that sense though into people that are hopefully enjoying my work. The idea of, man, if this is how bad things are right now, how much worse are they going to get?
Right.
And by the time you get there, I hope you realize, man, I can't believe how much worse it's still gotten.
Listen, because like I said, it started off in the hallway, and I mean, she's like clicks the light, and it's still kind of like dark, like the light's not really doing much for the hallway, and there's this thing at the end of the hallway, and I'm like, and the way that it was described, the hallway was built, I was like, y'all, when I tell y'all, I'm not looking into no more dark corners. I have closed my closet door at night, my bedroom closet door, because it's dark and something might stand in the nope, not doing it. My kids were scaring the shit out of me because they would walk up to me when I'm trying to read, and I'm like halfway throwing the book across the room like, y'all, please, I'm reading a horror novel. I need y'all not to walk up on me like that. Announce yourself. Hey, mom, call out my name. Do not walk up on me because somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't get a better endorsement than that for my book.
Listen, I'm here for it. I will definitely be featuring this during Blacktober Reads because
awesome.
I absolutely, and what I really loved about the book is that it's that kind of terror that it's not like jump scares. It's just this subtleness, like, did I really see something? At the end of the hallway, or like when I'm horrible with characters' names. When Stacy's sister was Des. There we go, Des. When she was out running, and the orphanage that had no door and no cross all of a sudden had a door and a cross.
Yeah.
And then she's like, I know that wasn't there before, but then she kind of turns away, and then she turns back, and then it's like gone. And just moments like that where it's, you're kind of, it makes you question your sanity, and also like runs chills down, and things like Stacy saying, they told me to, when she goes out in the pond, and she's like, they told me to come out here.
Yeah.
That on top of what I'm not going to mention about Stacy and how she's just walking down the street one day.
Yeah.
When she shouldn't be. And
I mean,
y'all will figure, that's like,
I even that, I mean, I pulled so many things from like stuff that always freaked me out for that probably didn't freak other people out when I was younger. And like the walking down the street, which I think I used 3 different times. There's a significance to a character walking down the street when they shouldn't be. And that's related to a specific, I guess I'm not going to get into the details of the story without maybe spoiling it.
Don't spoil it.
But it is related to something that there was a short story, very short story, allegedly true, that I remember reading when I was much, much, much younger, childhood. And there's a character walking, and there's this, the main thrust of the story is not about the character walking down the street in that short story. But there was something about that imagery in my mind that made that like the freakiest part, when people saw this person walking and they know they're walking with a purpose to do something, and now they're like, okay, what's going to happen? And then what they're there to do and everything else, and everything is kind of bookending that moment is what's really supposed to be more frightening. But for me, it was always the idea of, man, what if you're just kind of walking down the street and you see something that just kind of you're driving down the street, maybe you see somebody walking down the street that for one reason or another you're worried about where they're going, why they are where they are, and you have to start questioning that, and that can kind of linger in your head. I love that kind of I mean, I love all kinds of different horror, but that's always gotten to me, the stuff like that still has an influence over me from when I was younger, and would just make me question, like you said, question your sanity, question what you're seeing. Even the stuff I still, read today. I love a lot of different ghost stories, but I find myself gravitating toward, it's so hard to find, but I love it when I can find a really good story that's, somebody, a true believer, somebody who truly believes. I'm, I guess, somewhat in relation to ghosts, I guess I'm kind of agnostic. I'm like, I like hearing stories.
Can you be agnostic writing stuff like this?
Well, I always feel like I don't have a right to say I believe in ghosts if I've never actually like experienced anything that convinces me of it. But I've talked to other people who've told me
this should convince you, sir. What the hell are you talking about? I just knew that you had to believe in ghosts writing something like this.
I absorb the stories from people who do believe, because those to me are the most compelling and interesting, the ones that stick with me. It's like the old ghost lore or somebody's story. I just found on YouTube this elderly woman in Texas where there's allegedly like ghost lights and ghosts. I was just talking to a different somebody in a different interview I did, and we were both joking about how much we hate like when people say they're taking pictures of ghosts and then there's like little dust specks on the camera and they're like, that could be orbs. It's like, no, it's probably not. It's probably just flecks of dust that are reflecting off the light. That's just the way photography works. Exactly.
Your camera lens.
That's just the way photography works. But this elderly lady, and she's very matter of fact what she's talking about. She's like, oh yeah, we were on the porch, and this ghost light, about the size of a baseball, just came up, and she was like, this is when I was young, came up close to the family, came up toward the porch, just kept getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And my father, she was like, it's me and all my siblings, everybody sitting on the porch, and my father just said, I don't know what that is, but we should just go inside. And that's the whole story.
That's it.
And that's all it needs to be. I love that, because that to me lends it like an aspect of sincerity that, right. Like a lot of other people would be like, and then the ghost like chased us through the house and then it grew and turned into a whole person and, whatever, all this. And it's like, no, like she saw a freaky light, and this is what you're supposed to do, right? She was like, we saw this freaky light. We didn't know what to do. And eventually Dad was like, I don't even know what this means. It could be an angel. Right. There could be something beautiful about to be said. You need to get to the point faster, though. You're being too mysterious for too long.
Taking too long.
Up
here, say what you're going to say, and leave.
And if you got something good to say, we can still hear you from inside the house.
Exactly. Just,
just
talk through the door.
Talk through the door. Leave a note if you got to, whatever you got to do. But we're going to go inside because we can't explain you and you're being weird. I love that kind of stuff. When I re-listened to her tell that story so many times, just because I was like, this is the kind of story that I'm going to be able to put in my back pocket. And I mean, it's on old VHS. It looks like it was recorded ages ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, ages ago, whatever, the 80s, something. I'm old. Right. All that stuff feels like forever ago to me. Right. But I was just like, man, like this is the kind of stuff. These are the kind of things you put in your pocket. And you're like, okay, I can use this for mm-hmm. later and really enhance the way people behave and make it believable and put people there in my story. So that's what I try to do with the Spite House, and hopefully I'm able to do that.
And this all started from your teacher playing that story for you.
Yeah, I don't think the teachers are allowed to do that anymore.
I don't know whether we should thank her or like go slap her.
Well, R.I.P. Miss Nina. I'm a thanker. I got a career now because of that.
Well, yeah, true. So for that, we thank you. But for the scares, it's like a good thing, but it's also like, woo, okay.
I mean, I still think about that. It is pretty trippy that in kindergarten, I was 5 years old. Yeah. She was like, hey, we're gonna listen to this in the class, guys. And we all were like, there was no complaints. There was no like, oh, that's too intense for the kids. It was just kind of, I mean, it was Mississippi. It was the 80s. It was a very different time. Okay. But we were all on board. And like, just from there, it was just, I mean, all my oldest stuff that I read that influenced me, that I didn't even realize until later how heavy some of it was. Mm-hmm. School library, which is important to say because nowadays school libraries are under attack. Right. And, it's some nonsense. But I mean, I was at a Catholic school. Catholic school library, and I read Robert Bloch. So for anybody who doesn't know, Robert Bloch is the author of Psycho. I was in second grade, and I read a short story of his called Sweets to the Sweet, which is still one of my favorite short stories of all time. It was in this anthology. This anthology had a bunch of other really crazy stories when you think about it. There's one, I went back and reread, and I didn't even appreciate some of these lines until I got older. I went back and reread it years later, and there's a story called The Waxwork, and I can't remember the author's name. But in it, there's a man who is a serial killer, and he's cutting people's throats. And he goes into this whole little mini monologue about how different people collect different things. Some people collect stamps, some people collect coins. He's like, I'm a collector too. I collect throats. And that was a killer line. And I was like, I was 7 years old when I was reading this.
Wow. How were you not scared to death at 7 years old reading this? Something's wrong with you, Johnny.
I didn't even appreciate just like the literary quality and everything. I was just like, to me, I was just like more distracted by the idea of like, ooh, I wonder what's going on in this waxwork, this wax museum. Is it really a? Because the crux of the story is basically is it really a serial killer impersonating wax figures? Have the wax figures supernaturally come to life, or is the person who's experiencing all this just crazy and out of his own mind? And that's all I cared about. And then I go back and read it later, and I'm like, some of this stuff is actually pretty hardcore, especially by like the standard of how old I was. And I thought I was reading. I used to be one of those people. I was like, well, that's the kind of stuff I read, so I wasn't really reading adult level. This is adult level fiction that I was reading.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember that was second grade. It's in an anthology called Shudders by Ross R. Olney. And again, it also has Robert Bloch in there, who's the author of Psycho, which should tell you everything that you need to know. And this is the kind of stuff I grew up on.
So you didn't do the Nancy Drew mysteries. You just went straight for the hardcore stuff.
You know what? I really didn't. It's so crazy that you say that. Like, because I got older brothers.
I remember Scooby-Doo used to scare the shit out of me when I would watch it after school, and I'd be scared to be at home by myself because I was a latchkey kid and my brother was always out playing somewhere. And you up here reading stuff talking about I collect throats. What?
It's so wild that you said Nancy Drew. I've got 3 older brothers. I remember one of them had the Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. They had a bunch of those on the shelves. And there was one Nancy Drew book, and I think it's called like The Yellow Banister or something like that. But the cover looked scary. And I was like, this is cool. But then like when I would read through part of it, and I would read the back, and I would realize and ask my brothers, and I was like, so do any ghosts show up? Is there anything like horror about it? And they're like, no, it's more mystery. And as I got older, I came to appreciate mystery more. But when I was very, very young, like childhood young, it was like horror or almost nothing for me. Like I was like, give me a ghost, give me a monster, give me a killer on the loose. Especially for stuff I read. If I'd read comic books and read everything else with some action and some other. But if I was reading, I was always looking for anything that's going to be like scary. some kind of frightening. I need that charge,
like
even
Goosebumps.
Though it's keeping. Yes. If I'm too old for Goosebumps. God,
yeah,
if Goosebumps had been around.
But if that had been around, I think that would have been your jam.
Oh, yeah. I would have had the collection. I would have had them all, I'm sure.
Because, listen, my kids had me reading Goosebumps to them, and I was like, are you sure this is for kids? I'm like reading this stuff, and I'm scared to go to sleep at night. My kids are like, go to bed. I'm scared to go down the stairs and through the dark living room to my own bedroom after reading them stories, and they're just like,
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, kids are really into at least when I was young, and from everything I've seen, I don't have any kids of my own, but everything I've seen from like friends that have kids and things that you bump into like just online, and you're like, man, kids are still out here trying to. There's nothing. There's always going to be entertainment value with trying to scare each other some way or another. Tell a story that's going to freak somebody out. That's why there's still scary TikTok videos. No matter what the medium is, whatever change is, scary goes with it.
Yeah.
And especially if you fall in love with it like I do when you're young, it's going to carry with you, well into your, now I'm in my 40s, so I can testify to that at least.
Yeah. I mean, wow. Like I said, I'm scared of Scooby-Doo. I'm a child of the 70s. Like, they're like these monsters and shit showing up. And I'm just like, and my brother would love to like sneak in the house and come up behind me and scare the shit out of me. And I'm like, I don't want to go to sleep at night. And, and you're up here like, I'm reading about somebody collecting people's throats. Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
it's wild to go back and revisit some of that and think, oh, this is why it turned out this way. And again, Catholic school library. That was a Catholic school. If any place you'd think wouldn't have it, but
would not have it would be a Catholic school. But no. Okay, well. Moving on. The protagonist, Eric, he's this complex character with a very mysterious past, which I'm not going to talk about. How did you develop his character, and what challenges did you face portraying a father struggling to protect his daughters while he's grappling with his own haunted past?
Man, great question. The biggest challenge was trying to still enliven the story while not making Eric stupid to the point of unbelievability or complete and total irresponsibility. So that's why, like you said, certain events happen early in the house, he's
Mm-hmm.
also pretty decisive early on. Now he doesn't necessarily make the right decisions, but
Right.
he's at least decisive. I wanted him to just be not, there's a kind of a old trope um in a lot of horror fiction, haunted house fiction especially, where there's like a father figure who's like the last person in the family to accept the haunting is
Mm-hmm.
taking place,
Mm-hmm.
and so they, the rest of the family is like, hey, we got to get out of here. I don't want to lambast any particular creative stories, but I'm gonna cite one example because I do think overall it could have been so much better, and I like everybody involved in the acting and everything, but just this one element of the story that I hated.
Mm-hmm.
There's a movie called Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, and it's actually based. It's a remake of a, I think, a '70s TV movie that's a better version of it, but it
Uh-huh.
was made and had like a, I think, Guy Pearce, Katie Holmes, if I'm not mistaken. But there's like little creatures in this house, and they're like little gremlin like things,
Mm-hmm.
attacking the daughter at first. She's obviously then, and everybody in town's being weird and mysterious about it. They move into this house. It's a fixer-upper. It's not even their primary home. It's this giant mansion. Guy
Mm-hmm.
Pearce is the father,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just strictly it's a job. He's just there to fix the house up, turn around, flip it.
Mm-hmm.
The kids are freaking out. Everybody, like his daughters, freaking out. Then eventually, spouse as well. She's freaking out. Definitely
Mm-hmm.
something's happening here. And he's like, no, 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 we're not moving out. And I'm sitting there thinking the whole time, like, just put them in a hotel.
Right. Like,
Like,
why are
even
you
if
subjecting them to this?
you don't have to believe in it, but if they're that freaked out to the point they're like, we gotta go. Well, like
Right.
this, there's something happening here. I don't know. Just put them in a hotel. Like you're
Right.
clearly you have enough money. Now, there, different stories tell these things different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I was, I used to work in the banking industry. I always respect it a lot more now as an adult than I did as a kid when somebody's like, we don't have enough money to move. Because now I'm
Uh-huh.
like, you know what? I get it. Because I've,
Right.
unfortunately, been in situations where I've understood people about to lose their houses.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, it's a lot of the time. Look, living with a ghost would be less frightening than having to live on the street, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
especially depending on what's happening.
Like, look, just make some room. Don't show up when I'm in this room. You can have the
Exactly.
upstairs. I'll have the downstairs.
We can
We're good.
cohabitat here. Like, we can figure something out versus like
Right.
I got to be homeless for a little while. This is like
Right.
that's a lot more extreme and immediate.
Right.
But when it's a situation like that, he's very wealthy, or at least
Mm-hmm.
well-to-do enough that
Mm-hmm.
he's got this amazing job of fixing up this huge manor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you got the money, you've got the capacity to do this.
Right.
Now you're just being an idiot
Right.
and dire consequences. So, but they need that to happen so the story has a direction.
Right.
Because if
Right.
he's too responsible early on,
Mm-hmm.
well, then where's the story? Well, you just create something else, like make
Right.
something else happen.
Right.
Like think
Right.
of something
Right.
else that can happen.
Right.
Like the Evil Dead, the newest Evil Dead movie just came out. And I don't know how hardcore into horror some of your listeners may or may not be. Evil
Uh,
Dead is like a very vicious franchise. But I
okay.
mean, just the simplicity of it is like in the earliest movies, you know, the evil is strong enough to basically just knock out the bridge. They try to leave. They're in
Mm-hmm.
this cabin in the woods that is
Mm-hmm.
inhabited by ultimate evil. They didn't realize it. They do try to leave. Unfortunately, the evil is powerful enough to knock out the bridge. You're stuck here. Done.
Right.
At least give them, like, make them decisive. Don't have them
Mm-hmm.
sitting around in excessive denial when, like, it's
Mm-hmm.
very apparent something horrific is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when there are children's lives at stake or anything like that, and you're supposed to be a caring parent. That was the big
Right.
challenge for me with Eric. Was I wanted him to be smart, which doesn't necessarily again mean you make the right choices, but you're going to make a choice. You're going to keep your daughter's well-being in mind. Even the reason why he's taking the job in the first place, he's at
Mm-hmm.
least convincing himself there's a possibility that this is going to give us enough money that we don't have to be on the run, which is already putting my children in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not like you're exactly safe when you're stuck at the motel and I've got to run out to work and do what have you in this city and state
Right.
that's far away from home. So keeping all those kind of juggling those components of what's
Mm-hmm.
best for the story versus what's sensible for the character to not make him come off as a complete idiot. That was
Mm-hmm.
the big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, within the story, you have to balance those things. Don't
Right.
don't make the dad or anybody else really, but don't make the character purely idiotic.
Mm-hmm.
Just because that's the only way to advance the plot. If you can avoid it, I'm sure I've
Right.
made that mistake in some other writing before, but I try to be conscious of that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite scenes was, they're in the house and Des wakes up and she's like something is off, and she goes and opens the door, and Stacy's just sitting on the bed holding Miss Happy.
Yes.
And she's like, there's a boy in the corner. And she's like, I'm not lying. She's like, no, I believe you. And she was like, but basically, she was like, listen, I'll beat his ass, and if his sister comes out, she can get some too. And then she's like, you can tell she's scared to walk past that door to go out because she knows that thing is still there, even though she can't see it. But she walks out,
Yeah.
and then a later scene, they're down in the living room when the dad goes upstairs, and it's like, the thing is there in the door, like, you can't leave. I don't know what I would have done, because I don't think I'm going to walk through a ghost. It's just not going to happen. I see something standing there talking about you can't leave. I'm probably going to pee on myself first. And then I'm just going to start screaming. I don't think I can walk through.
Yeah. Totally. Well, I'm so glad you brought that up too, because that's one of those things I wanted to invert a little bit as well. It's kind of the old school Amityville horror. The spirits are telling the family to get out, right?
They're telling him you can't leave.
You can't leave. I wanted to flip that, and like a lot of my favorite haunted house stories. There's one that I've really enjoyed called Burnt Offerings from back in the 70s, and I mean, like, it's this idea of the house is deliberately trying to keep you there, and that kind of got flipped at a certain point where it felt like there were like stories where it was like the house is trying to push people out, but people ignore the signs, and it makes it easier to kind of just root for the villains. Almost you're rooting for the ghosts because these idiots deserve it.
Right.
Versus like the ones that I've always enjoyed are kind of like, man, you step into a situation, you get in over your head, you don't realize what you've done, and now you're in this house, and now the house is actively trying, or whatever's inside the house is actively trying to keep you from escaping. So what to what purpose? What does it want you for? That's so much scarier to me.
Yeah, like the one woman, one of the wife, the renter wife, who was just like, you can't have me, give me back.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my God, she's just there in the house, and it's like this thing wants your essence, and that was just so freaky to me. So freaky.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
So you have the relationship between Eric and his daughters. It's a significant aspect of the story. You kind of reveal over time why they're on the run. And at first we're like, you're like reading it. I found myself reading the book like, why the hell are they on the run? And then you find out kind of towards the middle, but leading up to it, you're wondering why they're on the run. Now, why have them on the run and seek refuge in this haunted-ass house, Johnny? Given what you and I both know about Stacy and about Papa Fred, who we're going to talk about later. Why have them go in this house? What are you doing?
I mean, it's not to reveal too much, but it's ultimately kind of all Eric's fault. After I give all this whole big spiel about him being not too irresponsible. He's not too irresponsible. I mean, he thinks he's making the right decisions. He's making questionable, I'll say, decisions, certainly. Some stuff you could definitely second guess. And so, yeah, like I wanted there to be this, kind of I want to make you look one direction while I'm doing something else over here, right?
Yeah. You did that.
Kind of 3-card Monty talking to you. I'm moving the cards around. I'm going to keep all the cards on the table, but I'm here to distract you in one way or another. Sleight of hand kind of with literature. I want you to be paying attention to the mystery and questioning why they're on the run. Then questioning the nature of the haunting of the house. Questioning what Eunice is up to. All these things. I want to give you all these different questions and then distract you enough with some of these things that when the answers start coming, some of these are questions you forgot that you maybe even had. You're like, oh man, I totally forgot about this part. And then, also by the end, leave you hopefully with some questions still burning in your mind. Some new questions to go along with the old ones.
You didn't just close this, tie it with a neat bow and no more. No, there's left open for my mind to wander and wonder what else is going to happen.
I mean, like, and I know that is some of the feedback I've gotten. I know that I've been very blessed with some very positive feedback. I have seen some negative feedback, and a lot of it does come from some of the open-endedness of the book. Which, if my editor had not told me, hey, you gotta give people a little bit more, it would have been even more open-ended if it was up to me. Because I was always also fascinated growing up with like stories where stuff happens and you don't really ever know why, and you could question like what are they doing, but then you find out the answers to the questions later, and they're worse. Like the answering the questions kind of ruins some of the fun. So like I love Friday or not, I wasn't as much of a Friday the 13th fan actually. Nightmare on Elm Street growing up.
Right.
And how is it that Freddy's able to come back through your dreams and kill you? We don't really know for like the first few movies. And then they finally start explaining it, and it's less fun when you find out the explanation. It was like more cool to just be like, this guy's just that evil. That's the answer. That's the whole answer. That's what you need. He's just
because
that
he
evil.
can.
Same thing with Halloween. Michael Myers. It's like, wait, this guy could take all these bullets and stabbings, and he like keeps getting back up, and he never dies. How is this possible? And then eventually they started trying to explain it and like come up with this whole curse and things around him. Yeah. It was like, this is less fun. Yeah. Like I liked it when it was just like, that movie literally says he's just this evil. His own doctor who was like, I followed him since he was a kid. He's just made of evil, and he can't be stopped. That's why. Right. And you're like, you still can have the questions in your mind. Okay, what does that even mean, though? How did he become this evil? What, like,
is there a backstory? Were you abused? What the hell happened?
What happened? But it's more interesting to leave those questions unanswered. Right. And so I'm still fixated by that element of it, and especially with supernatural horror. I mean, anytime you start explaining stuff anyway, if you really start thinking about it, it just gives you more questions.
It takes it away, because once you understand why something's happening, there's the power. You have all the power now. Yeah, because you can rationalize everything.
Totally. Yeah. And there's usually like deeper questions that come with the questions that get answered if you think about it. And like a lot of I love the Conjuring movies. I actually really enjoy those, but
I have not the nerve to watch those, sir. No, thank you. My kids have tried. I'm like, y'all. No, mom's not playing these games today.
I really enjoy the way that they're crafted. There's some maybe questionable elements about the real life couple that the stories are based on. Definitely some questionable elements about that, but one of the stories, basically the big kind of driving how to kill the evil element of it is if I know the name of the demon, then I can use I can call it by name, and knowing its name gives me power over it.
Okay, well, don't say it on this podcast. No, I don't want the thing showing up in here. Okay.
But my thing is always like, okay, so that, and the movie doesn't try to address this, and most movies wouldn't, and I understand that, but I'm also like, so you answered that, right? Like, how do we stop it? I need to know the name. Okay, but why? Why would knowing the name do anything? Right. What is how did those rules come out? Right. And so I say that just because, like, every time when it comes to the supernatural, every time you answer a question, you just have to ask another question. It just gets to another question. There's no end to it. It's not math. It's not 2 + 2 equals 4.
Because I'm not going to ask questions, sir. Thank you. Nope, I don't need to know why.
I'm good.
It's that way. I'm going this way. Don't say its name? Fine, I'm not saying its name. I don't need to ask those questions.
You'd be like LaFonda in the story, right? Even she's like, hey, I don't necessarily even believe, but if I'm not staying on a house that's 666 Lucifer Lane either, right? Like,
nope. She's
I'm not going to risk it.
Not going to risk
it. I'm good.
She's like, I'm good. I'm not pushing my luck. I'm saying I don't believe, but I'm good. I'm not crazy either. I'm not going to hasten any spirits to come and try and make me a believer.
I'm not going to dare anything to come after me. No.
No. I'm LaFonda. And in fact, I'm not even LaFonda, because I'd be out. I wouldn't even
You'd have left it all alone. You'd be like, oh, this lady hired me, thinks she believes in ghosts? Okay, I'm good.
You want me to train you? I'm going to train you in this house over here. I'm not going over there to the Spike House, ma'am.
Like, you're rich enough, like, buy me a little gym over here. You could go, we could...
Come to the gym.
Come to the gym. You need to get out the house probably anyway.
Right, you old. Get some movement going. Get to walk. You can even make it close enough so you can walk to the gym and back. Yeah. But I'm not messing with you in that house. No, ma'am. Nope. Not doing it, Johnny. Not doing it. So, how do you think Eric's quest to uncover the secrets of the Spite House speaks to his larger desires and just the larger human desires for understanding and closure.
Man, oh, great question. I mean, I do think, like I said, it's kind of the unending questions, right? And you can kind of end up going down that rabbit hole of like, what does it all mean? What is the meaning of everything? And I've never been super philosophical like that. I'm always kind of like, the meaning of life is whatever you make it, right? Whatever's important to you is what your life means. Meaning of life is different for everybody else, but that is like the big question, right? I remember you hear that all the time. What is the meaning of life? Like, there's supposed to be a universal purpose to X, Y, or Z, and just the idea of certain things that we do as human beings that maybe seem like they're in conflict with one another. We're social creatures. We depend on each other. We also really seem to just never be able to stop wanting to go to war and hurt each other as well.
Right.
And so there's this competition, cooperation, eternal conflict that we're going through. And so there's all these high-minded philosophical things. And then there's the idea of, if you have your family, obviously, what is your level of responsibility to your family and how that's changed over time, which is really grim to think about. But like, we live now in a, if you're in certain parts of the world, I don't want to make it seem like everybody's this privileged, certainly not. But I know here in America, even, not everybody has this benefit. But you read about, 200 or so years ago, 300 years ago, and it's like if, people would have like 8 kids and 4 wouldn't make it past like 3 years old. Yeah. And that was just like understood.
Right.
It was just like, hey, we're going to lose some kids. Like, that was like a fundamental,
probably why they had so many kids.
That's why you had a bunch of kids.
We know we're gonna lose some.
You're like basically counting on losing some. Everybody either lost a kid or knew somebody who, I'm exaggerating, but you read about it and it's like it was a pretty common occurrence.
Yeah.
And so then we now live in this age where, like, rightfully so, that is the most horrific thing you can imagine happening to somebody, and it's one of those things I wanted to kind of, you can't explore it too deeply, and it's something kind of behind the text. I wasn't trying to put it to the surface, but the trauma of the idea of, I've got to protect my family at all costs. I've got my daughters. I've got to protect them at all costs. He had his grandfather as well, who, was able to do things that are mythical to him within his family. And so we've got to do these things at all costs. And so then you come into what's the meaning of life? His entire meaning of his life is protecting my kids, and not accepting the idea that, there's any chance at all that I could fail at this. And whether it's to be combative or to cooperate, all these kind of fundamental answers of what it takes to be human, what it means to be human, and ultimately steering it back to the meaning of life is what you make it. Like, whatever it is that's important to you, in my mind. So I think that's like ultimately what Eric's final kind of internal conflict is, really, is what's most important to him in life. The meaning of his life, he's not sure himself in some respects. What is the most important thing, what's most valuable to him. And as the story progresses, he faces, this, he faces a division within himself. Yeah. Centered on this essential concept of, I don't know what's actually most important to me.
Yeah. He's quite literally divided.
Yes.
At the end.
Courtesy of the house. And so all these different things kind of come into play, and he has to make, try to make that decision. And, the story plays it out there to see how he deals with the difficulties of deciding what is most actually important to him and what his purpose in life is.
Yeah. Y'all see my face? I'm just saying, y'all got to read this book. You must read this book.
I love that you're bringing these up. These are some great, fantastic questions, and it makes me so excited to talk about it because I'm hopeful too with the book. I wanted to scare people, but I wanted to
that you did.
I wanted to sit with your in your head and make you think of things. This is one of
those books that, like certain movies that you see, like when I saw Nightmare on Elm Street for the first time, when I saw the first Halloween movie, when I saw The Exorcist, which I only watched one time. This is that kind of book that stays with you. Like you see, I have all the little tabs.
Nice.
And
Nice.
and I'm like going, while I was waiting for you to come on, I was going back through and reading certain parts. Like, let me just read this again.
Awesome.
Just, it's that kind of book that it's one of those, if you need a good creepy book, but not something that's gory, just
Right.
something that's like keeps you turning the pages and has you like sleeping with the lights on. This is that book.
Yeah.
This
yeah.
is that book. I love it. I do. I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. So now I want to talk about Papa Fred. Because
I think he's my favorite character.
He's my favorite. He is that dude. He ain't scared of nobody. When Stacy's scared of that dog, he's like, no, you ain't gonna be scared of the dog. Watch this. Takes her hand, makes her walk past the fence, gets down in the dog's face, and just stares at him. And the dog's like, oh, okay. Let me just back on up. And he says that you either let things happen or you make things happen, which I love about him. But how did you come up with him? Where did Papa Fred come from?
So I want to be very precise with the way I say this.
Okay.
because it's a horror story, right? And Papa Fred, as much as I do find him to be my favorite character overall, which I didn't realize at first, and then the more I talked about the story, I was like, I think this is my favorite character in the book.
Yeah.
And he only shows up sporadically, which I think helps too.
Yeah.
But he's also definitely got a major dark side. And so that's why I want to be very careful about how I say this, because I basically took my grandfather and said, what if he had a dark side?
Wow. Okay.
Which, I mean, my grandfather was a larger than life, so like the physical dimensions, I pictured a lot of that. Fate, I didn't give him the same face and everything when I was writing it, but I just pictured like the strong voice, the kind of this determination. My grandfather was very much somebody who, he didn't say something like either make something happen or let something happen. He was a lot more magnanimous about life. But by the time I obviously interacted with him, he was always my grandfather, right? Like, I don't know about his younger days. I hear stuff later on. It's like, he had a wild side too. Everybody does when they're younger. But when I knew him, he was like the church going, but very strong disciplinarian. Everybody in the neighborhood respected him. So I took all of that, and then I just thought, okay, but what if? And that, I think that reflects, yes. And I think that reflects a lot of people's like grandfather or father. I've talked to people who said like Papa Fred reminded me a bit of my dad, or like my grandfather, but with a darker edge. And I was like, yeah, that's what I wanted to do, was make it, and then present this idea of, what if this person whose advice you kind of like, also at the same time as you grow older, you realize, which I think is a common experience when you're a kid and you have adult influences, this advice that they gave you, maybe you realize it's not one size fits all. And then again, like you said, you twist that to a more extreme degree, right? Instead of it just being, well, there's nuance. It's like literally like, oh, like if I follow this advice to the T, actually, then I might be called upon to do some very unsavory things.
Right.
But is it absolutely necessary? Is it essential? I mean, again, Papa Fred does some, he's a powerful figure. He does some really, and in a very practical way. He's not a horror villain kind of in a sense, or menacing in a the scenes where he shows up. He doesn't convey a menace necessarily. I mean, in some respects he does, but not necessarily. To me, his most impactful moments, like you said, with the dog, the scene with Des, and
the cancer scene.
Well, the cancer
like,
scene as well.
You let it happen.
You let it happen.
Make something, and he's like,
But then his advice actually
helps.
Taken to heart, it helps.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes, and with Des, it's, oh, some boy's picking on you. I'm gonna go make not only him apologize. I'm gonna make his
daddy too.
I'm gonna make his dad basically apologize through his son. And I'm not gonna tell the dad to apologize, but he's gonna be there.
Gave him a look.
And he's gonna have to be there for it. And if his apology ain't to my satisfaction, do something about it before I have to do something to you. I mean, that's basically what that scene is the dad being like, I'm gonna hit my son because I'm afraid this guy might hit me if I don't do it.
Right.
because my son
Messed up.
picked on your granddaughter, your
Right.
great granddaughter. So, it's
Yeah.
there's complexity there, but I mean, there's also something. I mean, maybe it's my own dark side, but there's something admirable to it because like we talked about, like what is your fundamental drive? Is it to protect the family? He found his purpose,
Right.
and he knows the meaning of his life, and he lives to that meaning, and he has his own mantra, and I mean, he's almost again kind of mythical in the story because of the way he's able to, no matter what obstacle seems to be put in front of him, be able to overcome it and truly live out his life's goals no matter what. I'm fascinated by that character, but I know I keep going on these tangents. My bad.
I love him. This is what we're here for. I love Papa Fred. He is that dude. It's like, you don't start nothing, there won't be nothing. But if you mess with me, you're going to awaken the sleeping giant. And then what happens after that? That's on you. You bought every bit of it.
I have an idea, maybe, and I'm working on my second book, but it's not related to the Spite House. But if I did come back and do anything with the Spite House again, while I do have an idea for a sequel, I would prefer to actually write a prequel about Papa Fred. I mean, I've come to that conclusion that he's just. I would love to dive more into his life, and again, not answer too many questions, but just really dive into the interesting aspects of his character.
You could name it Papa Fred. I'm here for it. I'm ready for the book. I'm ready because he was my favorite out of everybody in the book.
I mean, he's just. I think he's just fascinating. I would love to write something about him, like something a longer work about him.
Because the fire.
Yeah, everything, and then the aftermath.
Yeah,
and then even when he's not present, right? It's it's Eric at the church listening to those old women talking about old Fred, and it's but then they find out, oh my God, one of his babies is listening on us.
Better shut up.
We better stop talking about that, man.
Right.
You better stop talking about that, man. You don't want that. So
like, you talk about him and he materializes in some kind of way.
They know they're worried, but don't poke the bear. So I would. There's so many more stories like that you could tell if you give him his own book. So I'm definitely interested in revisiting that. So down the road, if I'm still doing this, knock on wood, hopefully, then that's something I would love to do.
I would really love to see a book about Papa Fred because he's got a whole story. He's
got
a whole story. Yeah. So family and fatherhood, while we're on that subject, seem to be two very strong themes in this novel. And usually with horror novels, it's not usually about like family and all that. So let's talk about that.
So you're right. Like a lot of the time, you're wondering where people even like where the parents,
right?
Especially like growing up, like there's a lot of like movies and stuff you watch, like Friday the 13th, for instance, and it's like they keep sending these kids to this camp.
The kids ain't where are the parents?
Like, shouldn't somebody be like, hey, we're not going to send you to that. I heard people died at that camp.
Right. Like what are y'all doing?
My parents wouldn't have sent me to a camp if somebody died like 50 years ago. They'd be like, wait, there was an unsolved murder that happened at that camp 50 years? Like, nah, well.
Nope. Yeah, unsolved means the killer could still be there. You ain't going.
Much less like 2 or 3 years later or something, people still going up.
Nah.
So there is like an absence of family a lot of the time, and I feel like in a lot of horror fiction, and like I said earlier, there's like an old, even kind of trope of the dad always being like, oh, I'm at work, I can't make it home, and the mom is the only one who's there like with the kids, and at first the kids see the ghosts, then the mom maybe sees the monster, whatever it is, and like the whole time. And I think that happens because once you start incorporating family elements, like I said before, you got to explain certain things, right? You got to make them responsible, or they're going to be pretty heavily hated by anybody in the audience or any reader who's like, hey, I've got kids, I wouldn't do that.
Right.
And so I think people will try to avoid family because it can be, and I can understand it can be tricky to navigate that. For me, though, it just raises the stakes. And I really want people, like I said, like you said, I want people to leave from having read my work and really feel like man, that's still sitting with me. That is still tearing at me a little bit. And one of the ways you raise the stakes, I mean, we've all got family. I think most of us love at least a few family members, if not everybody in the family. And so the idea of fear is not just about I'm afraid for myself. It's not just the killer's chasing you. It's what if the killer's chasing my brother or my sister? Or what if they're chasing my mom? And I can't get there in time. Or I'm trying to get there in time. And am I going to get there fast enough? There's a great scene in Poltergeist where the mom has been attacked in her room by the spirit. But that's not the scariest part. The scariest and the memorable thing for me, at least, she gets to the hallway, and it's the hallway to her kids' room, and she can hear her kids screaming, and it looks like the hallway
keeps
stretches.
getting longer as she's running. Yes,
it's stretching. It's like I'm never going to get here. That's and that conveys that sense of, oh my God, my kids are in danger, my family's in danger. I'm trying to run and save them. Like the attack on me, I'm over that already. The only thing that told me is that I don't want this to happen to my kids. Let me go try to get to them. And the hallway, like you said, is getting longer. And now I got to run faster. I got to dig deeper. She's got a little bit of a limp, but she's got to push through it. I love that scene because it conveys her fear, her overcoming the fear. And it's all tied to this. It wouldn't feel the same if that was just the door to get out of the house. If it was just like, I got to run down this hallway and it's stretching and this just to save myself. There'll be a certain amount of fear, but if it's like, I got to do this to save my kids, I got to save my family, that enhances the moment. That makes it that much more impactful to me because that's the dynamic. So then, if you're gonna approach it that way, which I try to do, then you got to make the family dynamic feel strong, and you got to make them, relatable, love each other. There's stuff that's in the book that doesn't move the plot. It's just there to show that this family has a history, make them feel like a real family. They got their own silly game that they play, their version of an ABC game that they play. They have, Stacy has a favorite doll that we know that she helped to make, and everybody in the family kind of understands she's good with arts and crafts and learn stuff, and everybody kind of, the way they navigate these things, a lot of it doesn't necessarily need to be there, strictly speaking, for like, this is essential to the plot. But it's important to me for like, to show the bond of the family, not just, because anybody you could write it and say, oh, the father, we would assume father loves his daughters, but he knows them. He knows how to talk to them. They have little jokes, amongst themselves, all these things. And that shows, like you said, the bond. These people have been around for a while with each other. They care about each other. They know the way that they talk. They know all these little idiosyncrasies. And that, again, like that, to me, that's fun because to write that kind of thing enhances, like I say, the stakes of the story. I do think a lot of time in horror, like I said, it potentially presents like a plot difficulty that it's easier to just say, hey, there's no parents around, we don't know where they are. It's Charlie Brown, right? It's, you know what I mean? A lot of horror fiction is Charlie, and I loved Peanuts when I was a kid.
I love Peanuts too, but the parents were never around.
No, parents ain't there at all, because it's just...
Kids just living fat in all these houses. There ain't no parents around. You don't see not one of them.
Never see a parent. Don't know what the teacher even sounds like other than a little horn.
Womp, 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 womp. Like, how the hell y'all know what that teacher's saying? What is they saying?
And like any kind of meaningful interaction is just all the kids. That's a lot of, I feel like, I don't want to say that to disparage because I love a lot
but
of.
But it is a lot of horror.
It does feel like a lot of horror fiction kind of takes that route because it's. Like I said, it doesn't present as many maybe challenges, but for me, it's worth it to incorporate those things because your story is going to be that much scarier and more exciting, more thrilling, more interesting if you can bring the family into it, or just any kind of relationships, strong relationships where people care, whether it's a powerful friend group, whatever, just a strong group relationship. If you can do it, if it fits with your story, don't neglect it.
Yep, absolutely. So let's talk about Miss Eunice for a minute. Tell our characters about Eunice Houghton.
So Eunice is a very wealthy older woman. She kind of is the dictator, sort of,
got
of
the
this
whole
little
town in her pocket.
Because she's got so much money and she's brought jobs in. She's brought her factory in. She runs a health and fitness kind of empire, little empire of fitness gadgets and tools. Just kind of, she's the person who builds the components that help your Fitbit work.
Yeah.
and she's got factory workers that help build those components, etc. So she's got all the money, and so she kind of runs the town, but she runs it in an arguably semi-progressive way. But we establish pretty early on there's probably a selfish reason for that. And as the story comes along, like you said, there's some Civil War history at play in the story. We find out that she believes herself to be cursed because of these events that happened in the past related to the Civil
cursed.
War. She's super duper cursed.
She's cursed for real.
And she's determined to try to figure out what she can do to circumvent that curse. And she's got a whole history where, as a child, she was scarred by an event where she saw her favorite aunt die in a very disturbing fashion. And so she's this has driven her entire life. So I mean, you find out basically that this is also why she even has a fitness empire, because she's focused on how do I stay alive as long as I can, so I can find out how to not
break this curse,
not deal with this curse when I die.
Yeah.
And so that I really am I find her to be like a fascinating antagonist, because she's her motivations are understandable. Right. Her actions are nonetheless indefensible, right? She does some things that are just like you can't really forgive her, but you can kind of understand why somebody would be driven to do some of the things she does, and some of the some of the questionable things that, actions she takes, some of the information she hides, some of the lies she tells, etc. All of her little manipulations, how heartless she is about certain things.
Right.
Ever since she was a little girl, she realized I've got this horrible curse that plagues my family. That I'm the last one. I got to try to figure out a way to dodge this, and there's nobody else who's going to help me but me.
Right. Yeah. And I love how, she's like this. She has just enough money to keep everything sort of quiet. Like, there's the gossip that people have, but for the most part, everybody except Miss Millie is just like, Millie's the only one that wants to call her out on anything, but everybody else is just like, no, you know.
Well, she's got the money, and she's got nobody. Everybody's kind of comfortable in town. Now they understand, like the whole town is. I love there's a moment in the book. I mean, it's weird to say I love this about my own book, but anyway, it sounds weird. But there's stuff that I know I enjoyed writing. I mean, there's the part where she is talking about how the town itself. The house is super haunted, but the whole town itself, she's like, I've gone out to the park and I'll
and seeing people watching. Yeah. And they're just they look up and
there's ghosts all over here, and they're not as active and crazy as the ones in the house maybe, but they're all over this place. And even with that, even knowing that this is what's going on in the town, these people are also like, we got the jobs, we're pretty comfortable. As they're entering town, they realize, we got the cars start looking nicer than maybe some of the other places they've been driving through, and all these other things. And it's like you establish, like, she's got this grip on the town, but it's something because everybody in town is getting something out of her. It's not that there's fear, but there's a fear of losing our cash cow as much as anything else.
Yeah, it's losing our comfort zone more than it is. They're not scared of her. They're just scared of what her leaving might do, or what her lack of resources would do to the town.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's we've seen that, I think, play out in America in a lot of different ways, where people will, in a local area, if there's a company that's like, hey, we'll pick up and move jobs out if you don't do X, Y, or Z. We see that with stuff that's not even really that beneficial. Sports teams hold cities hostage regularly just to be like, hey, if you guys don't raise the taxes and make the taxpayers help pay for at least half of our new $2 billion stadium, we're going to move elsewhere. And the people are like, all right, we'll go ahead and vote to do this just so we can keep our team, because that gives us this level of entertainment and comfort. And that's not even related to like jobs, let alone when you got a place that's like, we'll move away and take all of our jobs with us if you don't acquiesce to everything that we're demanding. That's kind of the situation that Degner is in with Eunice.
Yeah. Degner is a whole book by itself too.
Yes.
I mean, just the hint of, the fact of this town and its history and the things that have gone on there, and the fact that the whole town is kind of haunted, and
Oh yeah.
in my writer's mind, I almost feel like Degner kind of pulled Eric and his daughters, or at least pulled Eric to them,
Yes.
and
There's definitely a element of that.
yeah, and I'm still trying to figure out, that's why I'm going to go back and read the book again, because I'm still trying to figure out what it is. What is that pull? Like what his family has this power, and how is that really related to this curse that her family has?
Yeah.
I'm just like examining that relationship in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, there's we can talk about it if you want to offline. Because I've got a theory on it, but there definitely is a pull there, but it's maybe not as overt as it seems, but in maybe another way it might be. But yeah, we could chat it up. I'd love to get your thoughts on
but
it.
But for me, it's there. It's it's like, what is pulling him here?
Definitely.
Yeah.
There's a magnetism that's part of why he ends up where he ends up.
Mm-hmm. And I still want to know why, he wanted to go so badly to his grandfather's house and yet stopped here.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. There are some components at play there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, where can readers find your book, Mr. Compton?
Oh man, anywhere. Hopefully, anywhere books are sold. Definitely first check support your local bookstores. Big, I think Indie Bookstore Day is this Saturday.
Saturday, yes, it is.
Yeah. And so definitely go support your indie bookstore wherever you are at locally. If they don't have it in store, ask them to order it. Everybody these days, more than likely they can order it for you. So definitely do that. If for whatever reason that's just too far for you, what have you, can find it still at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, of course. In any kind of bookseller. But I would always encourage people, or obviously your local library as well. A lot of library. I just did an event here in Texas Library Association. Grateful for them to have invited me to speak on a panel there. And a lot of librarians were like, oh, like I can pick this up. Got some great questions. Support your library. Support librarians. I spent, like I said, I read all these books when I was a kid in the library. I spent a lot of time. Libraries are also really spooky, especially a good old library. Oh man, they're quiet. They're deliberately quiet. You're walking amongst the books. You're kind of walking down a little narrow hallway when you're in the aisle. Somebody could come by. You don't know who's around the corner.
And don't let it be a multi-level library where you could go down in the basement. Child, let me tell you,
libraries are great places for there's not a whole lot of libraries and horror stories actually, which is maybe I need to help correct that. Go. I'm trying to think of the greatest scary library scenes, and I'm like, Ghostbusters, that doesn't count.
Yeah, come on.
We got to do a better job because they're a great location for that. But yeah, check at your local library as well if you want to do that way. But a lot of different options for you to get out there and buy the book or read the book through other means.
All right. And where can we find you on the internet and social media?
JohnnyCompton.com. You can find me there. I've got my own website with that. And then social media, Twitter, although I'm not there very often. Instagram, which I'm leaning more into because I do kind of enjoy the whole aesthetic of Instagram.
Right.
Both of those at Compton Writes. Compton, WRITES,
Awesome.
for Twitter and Instagram.
Awesome. Well, we have come to the end of our show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast. This was fantastic. Outstanding questions. I really enjoyed this.
Great. Thank you. I'm so glad you could come and scare the shit out of me. And, with this book, it was awesome. And Booze and Bros, y'all know how I do. At the end of every show, I leave you with a quote. And today it comes from Black Thought, the leader of the Philadelphia-based hip-hop group The Roots. And he says, "Don't do anything for fear, because fear will never do anything for you." Until next time, you know what to do. Grab a book and read, and I'm out. Thank you for lending me your ear today. If you've enjoyed this independent podcast, you can help me continue to shine the light on Black authors and their stories by becoming a patron at patreon.com/betweenthereads, or by giving a one-time gift at www.ko-fi.com/betweenthereadspodcast. That's ko-fi.com/betweenthereadspodcast. Tune in next time for another great episode.